Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Hello and welcome to the Talk of the Doc podcast. We're just saying the word cybersecurity sometimes makes someone want to accept a spam call just to not get into that topic. But anyways, let's back up. Let's figure out some basic moves together. I'm your host, Steve, the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is in. Our guest today is Peter Gailey. He's CEO of Gailey Solution LLC. But Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself. Welcome.
Steve, thanks for having me. My background, I've been in the IT business, the computer business, for almost 50 years, literally.
Wow.
Have seen it from all different angles. The last 10 years or so, I've been focusing on cybersecurity. What my firm does is we leverage automation, number one, but we help companies identify their risk and meet compliance mandates, depending on the industries that they're in. So I built my company around a suite of services that can be bought, end-to-end solutions or a la carte solutions. Very similar to what Fulcrum does.
Well, I was very impressed. I've been, 30-ish years and stuff, but 49 years. Wow. What's the, in your head, what's the thing you remember most about being a technologist?
I'm basically a business person.
Okay.
So I've always been sales, business development, and, went up through the management chain. But as I proceeded, I started off with, very root understandings, the beginning of technologies in the storage space and the system space. So just by proximity in the meetings, I was actually in what's called the OEM business, the original equipment manufacturers business.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it, somebody like Ford or GM, they don't build cars. They integrate a bunch of components and then test it and then build cars. It's the same in the computer business. IBM, Google and stuff, they don't really build disk drives, or they don't, some of them are building CPUs and memory and stuff, power supplies. So I was in that original equipment manufacturer space selling to all the mini computer people and the PC people over time. So I've been able to see a lot of technologies develop, and it's really been interesting. I have stories that people just don't believe, and if we have time, I can tell you some of the deals that I've put together that have just been pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I do like to go ahead and just like jump right into it. Since we wanted to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, I always like to start off like a good doctor's visit with the vitals. So my first vital is pulse. Usually I think of the pulse as kind of it's the current state of the market, just trying to get a sense of what industry trends are. So what's one of the industry trends that you think is shaping what you see in cybersecurity?
As far as industry trends,
Oh, just about what's going on with, SMBs, for example.
well, two things. Let me see, from an industry trend, I see a lot of consolidation. When you get into a cybersecurity program at an end user account, let's say, you're an SMB or you're a division of a company or whatever, and you're trying to manage your risk. What you have is a whole portfolio of things that have to be addressed, and each one of those, it's called a control, right? Each one of those controls has got to be executed by a project, for instance. So, hey, I need two-factor authentication. Okay, well, I need a budget for it. I need to have people for it. I need to have expertise, either have them in-house or out-house. So that might be one control and one requirement. And what I see is there are literally, depending on your industry, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of controls and things that clients need to do. So from a company perspective, the trends are they're playing whack-a-mole. They're just chasing the shiny penny. What do we have to do today? Oh, I have to do a risk assessment. Oh, I have to do a vulnerability assessment, right? and they're generally not looking at it from a program approach. So the program would be all of the needs, and then you piece them in and manage them by a program management side. To answer your question from another angle, what do I see happening in the industry is that there are many, many companies, Kaseya being one, that are buying companies that are building out an internal stack or an internal portfolio of companies and then trying to provide the services that are needed for their clients, for the small, for the MSPs and for the small business clients.
So
So
in your head, are you
there's
thinking that?
aggregation, I'm sorry, there's aggregation going on in the industry, makes it kind of easier for some of the end users to decide what they're going to do with their stack, how they're going to meet the requirements.
Now in your head though, is the consolidation a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a tricky thing, actually. I think that the consolidation stuff, when done well, is a good thing. It depends on what you are consolidating. Nobody can do it all. Literally, nobody can do it all. So there's, to me, the positives are that, some integrated tools and reporting and monitor and manage for security and compliance are coming together. So it's making it a little easier for the end user. One of the reasons it may not be great is that the company that's doing the aggregating, they may be buying a company that their tool set is just good enough, but not great. So the trade-off is you're trading, if you do a la carte plan, you're able to pick best of breed. If you do the consolidated plan, the aggregated plan, it's probably just good enough. I always fall back on my strategy is let's talk security first. And if one of those integrated aggregated stacks meets your security requirements, then great. And then let's look at compliance as another lens on top of that. So it's always security first, compliance second. So again, the decisions and the trade-offs are resource related. How many people do you have? If you don't have many people or much budget, you might be better off going with that aggregated integrated tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess what I'm hearing from you, your takeaway from it is it's not really good or bad. It all depends. It depends on your situation, your business context, the things that you've got going on, and what the specific goals are you're after, or whatever controls you're targeting. In your entire program.
Many, 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 many other issues. If you have a security program in place and you happen to have the tools and the services and the expertise to administer these five control categories, and that integrated stack already, has those five in there, and you have to do what's called a forklift upgrade, right? You got to do a switch over. Those are decisions that need to be added into the decision trees in your budgeting and, in your program management. So that's why I say it kind of all gets down to program management. And, that's budgeting, it's timelines, it's, ease of integration, kind of methods to do program management.
Now, in you're drawn on your experience as that business person who's a program manager. What do you perceive to be kind of the most common blind spots you see in organizations? Whether they're an SMB, a nonprofit, a municipality. What makes them easy targets when you engage with them?
We're not easy targets for me to engage.
Now,
I
who,
go
who
in.
are the people you engage with and determine that they're easy targets? What is it that makes them easy targets in those situations?
I would say confusion, and they don't have if a company isn't looking at the big picture first and they're just playing quote unquote whack-a-mole, just doing projects as they hear them and they think they're doing it, if they don't have an organized approach, they might be allocating scarce resources toward the wrong things. So one of the luxuries that we have in the computer business, in the cybersecurity business, is the concept of a bunch of standards and frameworks. So one of the best things to do and one of the first steps is, you have to, mid-size division or a mid-size company has got to decide whether they want to take cybersecurity seriously. And one of the first things you do, or you should do, is first of all, understand the industry that you're in and what the mandates are from a compliance perspective. If you're in healthcare, you have to comply with HIPAA, right? If you're trading credit cards, you have to play in what's called the PCI world, or the payment card industry world. So you need to understand your industry, you need to understand your compliance variables, and then it's a question of, okay, let's do a gap analysis. Where are we? How mature are we? What are the gaping holes that we need to work on first? So again, it all gets back to a program approach.
Now in my head, when I think through, on my experiences, it feels like most organizations know the industries they're in, and they hear the terms for the compliances, but they're listening to their own internal IT team or MSP, and they're hearing the stuff that they hear that makes them believe that they're on the right track.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, for a leader that might be listening today, what are the first two or three things maybe they should verify this week to try and figure out, are we on track, or do we need to do some sort of external third eye health check to get a sense of where we are?
If you're speaking to your IT folks, the IT folks are only a subset of cybersecurity. Okay, so they're going to look at it through an IT lens. They may not be looking at it through a people and a process and a technology lens, right? So I have a litmus test that I ask one question. If I ask one question, I can tell the maturity of the company that I'm speaking to. And the question's very easy. Within 24 hours, can you give me a full inventory of all of your IT assets? All your, notebooks, servers, switches, all your software, your rev levels. If they can't do that, then they are not secure, right? So it's just okay.
I said number one in every framework, not your hardware, not your software.
Number one. And it depends on who you ask, right? If you ask that of a CEO, he's going to say, we probably have that. Let me, get to the right person, and they'll dig it up. Taking a look at it from a business perspective, high end, where are you? What are you doing? One of the services I perform in that front is called a baseline assessment. Let's baseline you. And you said, your analogy was a doctor's appointment, right? I'm going in for my general physical.
Sure.
Okay. And part of that general physical is, hey, I'm on these meds. Okay, let's readjust those meds. Do I still need to take them or not? Hey, I've had, 9 surgeries. Okay, let's make sure you understand each one of those surgeries I've had. So when I come in gimping on my knee, then it's like, okay, he's probably got arthritis there, right? So the point being, let's get a baseline of where we are and what we know, and then apply that to the framework, the industry standard framework, and figure out what's important.
Now, as you've gone through this process with organizations, you're talking about your question for your leadership. Is that question aimed at the IT people, or do you have a different question that you aim at the IT technologist associated with that organization?
That single question is more toward the technical people. The CEO isn't going to be able to come up with an inventory, like, pull up a spreadsheet kind of thing. Um, but no, from a CEO perspective, I'm going to say, hey, what kind of budgets have you got? How many people have you got allocated? Are you using managed service providers? Those kinds of things. So it's a different level of detail and knowledge, depending on the size of the company. But it's a different, let's say, set of decision criteria and knowledge that a CEO or a CXO is going to need to have. And if they don't, if you've got a finance guy that doesn't have a clue, that says, hey, there's no budget for cybersecurity, there you go. That's, you should be doing that, right? Um, and that might be okay. It's just, here's the amount of business risk you are taking if you don't allocate funds toward security and compliance, right? So they're not bad decisions, but they should be informed decisions. So it's kind of a specific area in the C-suite. It's just kind of, my questions are more of a general nature, and then get in. And once I've done the baseline, and they may have already done a baseline, and then it's a question of allocation. So there's one of the great frameworks, regardless of what industry you're in, is called and you're probably familiar with it, of course. One of the things that is one of the hidden gems in that is that there's 18 different categories, right? CIS 18 is what it's called. But that basically is a progressive program approach that basically says start at control category 1, right? And if you've kind of mastered that, that's the really important stuff. That's the inventory question I talk about. And then you go to category 2, right? Identity and access management. Who can see, who can get to, and who can see what. So it's literally 18 different cybersecurity kinds of objectives and controls, and you just methodically march through it. So I use that as a model and a starting point, regardless of the industry and regardless of other frameworks. But that's a really nice, methodical, easy to understand, high level conversation starter, if you will.
And in your conversations with your executive team, your CFO, a lot of times they see a portion of the P&L as a percentage. So cybersecurity, technology, those kinds of things. Do you have like a specific guidance to them for what they should be spending on these things? Obviously, it depends on their risk tolerance, but do you have a
Yeah.
percentage?
There are some rules of thumb in different industries. Certainly, if I've got a digital, 100% digital business, then I'm going to be spending, higher than other industry ratios and whatnot. But there's some general industry numbers, and those can all be researched, if you will. But again, the key is, do you have a program? Are you following these 18 categories or however many? Are you cognizant of risk? Do you care? Right? It's all risk related. One of the hardest things in business is measuring risk, right? A lot of it is gut feel, right? A lot of businesses have minimum requirements that they have to do to stay in business. And that may or may not include, depends on where cybersecurity comes in the mix. The key is cybersecurity is in the mix, whether you know it or not, because it's one of the biggest risk areas, right? So, and depending on the size of the company and the amount of resources, very high probability you're out of business if you don't manage your cyber risk, right? Big companies out of business. So if nothing else, it's a conversation that has to be had, and identify and understand the risks, and make business decisions that are appropriate to the risk and your risk tolerance.
Got it. Well, we've talked a little bit about the pulse, but I guess I'd like to move on to kind of the next thing. Kind of I guess the blood pressure. What performance metric do you think tells a story for you right now in your area?
In cybersecurity, there's in the cybersecurity world, there are a couple of very, very high level organizations around the world. You've heard of ISO, of course, and you've heard of NIST, of course, National Institute of Standards and Technology, right, in the U.S. In the U.S., most, if not all, of the companies are subject to the NIST standards, right, and NIST frameworks. So there is a component in NIST that's called CSF, right? Is the cybersecurity framework, right? So it's basically a measurable set of metrics you can test against. So you would do a gap analysis, take again baseline, right? What do we have? How well is it implemented? People, process, technology wise, right? Go in there and do a NIST CSF. It happens to be at revision level 2 right now. Go in and do an assessment against that, and it's going to give you a maturity score from 1 to 5. 5 being perfect, very few people ever get it, and 1 being, hey, you got a lot of work to do, right? So those would be the metrics in the States. Internationally, ISO, the international standards body, has relatively the same kinds of standards that are measurable in Europe. And I explained the difference between the two is there you've got, meters and pounds and kilometers and centimeters and stuff. Here we have inches, feet, yards, and miles, right? You're measuring stuff. They just happen to be to different measurement components. So you measure stuff with NIST CSF against American terminology and American standards, and the ISO stuff is against international standards and international. The interesting nuance is the bigger the company and the more broad the target base of their clients is, then companies will, if they do a lot of international business, they will generally need to meet both NIST standards and ISO standards. So again, that's a business decision that you're going to make. What markets and what locations and what standards and frameworks do you have to play against? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess for the average SMB, are you finding that a lot of them are engaging the NIST framework to get to where they're going?
By far and away, the majority of the standards and frameworks that people follow in the US are NIST based. So when you talk about HIPAA is NIST based, right? Anything healthcare is NIST based. The payment card industry is NIST based, the controls. So let me use an example. It's interesting because let's use passwords as an example. So one control category might be, hey, you got to have passwords, right? Your passwords have got to be 12 digits with X amount of uppers and lowers and numbers and caps and special characters, right? So if you're in HIPAA, I don't know what the exact numbers are out of my top of my head, but they might say, okay, you have to have 12, you have to have 5 lower, 5 upper, 1 special character, and 1 number at a minimum. Okay. And then you might go into the payment card industry and they say, hey, yeah, you have your 12 characters, but 8 lowercase and 3 uppercase and 1 number and 1 special character. So they're both the same control. It's just a little bit different standard that you have to meet and follow between PCI and HIPAA. But it's the same control. It's the same control category. The requirements are a little bit different. So if you're in a business that you're in the medical field, but you're taking credit cards, you want to make it easier on yourself to say, I'm going to follow the more strict interpretation of what that control is. And it might be the PCI version or it could be the HIPAA version, right? Same control, same category, but just you got to answer the question a little bit different, whatever industry you're in. So you need somebody that has the nuance, that understands the nuances, that you can solve the same control and meet the objective.
Now, I was under the impression that some of the revisions of the NIST 900 series, they kind of removed some of those things like complexity and other things in more recent revisions. How do you handle arbitrating between different frameworks, different revisions? If it's all founded on NIST and NIST is rolling something back and your compliance has more, what's your advice to organizations that are, all they're concerned about is trying to be secure in a budget
Yeah.
friendly way? What's your guidance to them?
The guidance is simple. The control and the standards are the control and the standards, no matter what rev level they're at. So I call it adult supervision. You need in order to understand this stuff, you need adult supervision in the room. Okay. So if NIST, if PCI goes into version 9.3 and they've made some changes, then you need to meet 9.3, or they're going to give you the rules that maybe they may have rollout timelines that you have to interpret. But the control is the control. There's no getting around that you have to meet it. So there's really not many surprises. The hard part is making sure that you're working with the latest and greatest.
I think for a lot of executives, they're not thinking about the compliances. They're not thinking about the frameworks. In their heads, there's two things that are top of mind. How do I not get ransomware? How do I not get attacked by a business email compromise? How do you how do you take the conversation you want to have with them from the conversation they want to have with you and figure out that place to start?
Got it? That those are what you think are your biggest risks, business wise. Best practices are that in order to reduce your risk for each one of those compromises, is to do these things: multi-factor authentication, EDR, XDR, right? You want to make sure you have IT, incident response and disaster recovery in place. So it's not if, it's when. Okay, when that happens, you have the ability to recover quickly. Okay, so you need to practice that. So if you are very if the CEO says, I'm really concerned about email compromise, then you go and you say, okay, well, in order to get in front of that, here are the bunch of things that we need to do: multi-factor authentication, identity and access management, right? These are all components of a program that you would basically say, wait, identity and access management, wait a second. I don't want Steve to be able to log into Peter's email. I don't want Steve as an identity person logging into me as my identity, right? So you have to put safeguards um, in place for that. So ransomware has its symptoms and its attack vectors and its technologies that are used to be able to perform ransomware. Email compromise has, I'm going to, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it best practices, but they, the bad guys have got practices that they use that are their best, right? So the industry kind of knows what they are, and it's like, okay, here are the things that we put in place to counter and prevent. You always want to work on the prevention side, but you do also need to work on the reaction. So you should always be proactive if you can, because once disaster hits, then it's then it's mayhem. So in that case, when your question, when the CEO says, "Hey man, I'm really worried about email compromise," for a cybersecurity guy, that sets a couple of flags up, right? Okay, let's go and make sure that this stuff is locked down pretty well, right?
So the way you find to discuss with them is help them with some of those basic cybersecurity hygienes that target that specific attack vector.
Yes. And there's hygiene. They probably have it in place, but you need to go in and recheck it and recalibrate it. You might have to reconfigure it. You might have to patch it, right, for a later patch. Well, so with email compromise, again, you would, if that's the biggest concern by a CEO, then you would circle the wagons and say, okay, what are the variables that are going to affect email compromise, right? So you'd look at your configurations, you'd recheck those. You might have some tools and some filtering tools in place, but each one of those services that you have, email being one, has got a whole bunch of steps to implement it properly. So you might just go that have somebody that's versed on that stuff go back and reconfigure or relook at it, make sure it's locked down, set up some filters, just pay special attention to that set of controls.
Gotcha. And you said one thing before that I think was important. We talked a little bit about some of the controls, but you briefly mentioned procedures or process. So,
Yeah.
as far as business email compromise, are there like two or three things you advise organizations right off the bat that, hey, in addition to your tools, you want to make sure and have this process, this policy, this whatever in place?
But
Okay.
yes, there are people that's all there are service providers that's all they focus on is email, right? There are people that all they focus on is your phones. Remember I said adult supervision is a good idea? If your CEO says, hey, I'm really concerned about email compromise, I would bring in an email specialist. Not expensive, right? Figure out what they're recommending and, what you have in place and go. They would be adult supervision. So let's talk about how that relates to compliance. Okay. So whenever you have email, one of the control sets that you have to have is what we talked about was identities and access and management. Who can get to what? Who can get to this email account, right? How do you manage the passwords for this email account? So those are all set up with controls. The control is going to be something that says, remember, here's, your passwords need to consist of this, right? They need to be, 12 digits and, whatever the schema is. So that is the control. So the controls are finite in these standards, right? So if this CEO is in the medical world, they're going to want to follow the controls associated with HIPAA, right? And data privacy. So as they set up their controls for email management, you might as well do that, make it secure, and oh, by the way, meet the control for HIPAA as well. So the way that compliance works is you have a control that's an industry mandate. HIPAA, you have to have passwords and they need to be this, period. And then you have to have a policy. So that's in NIST, the HIPAA controls, right? In NIST certification, if you are, you don't certify against this, you actually attest in this. But so that's the control that NIST has set up for passwords. And then you have to have, so that comes from NIST. That's the standard that comes from the federal government. Then the company has to have a policy. And the policy, and documented, says, hey, we're going to follow this. We're going to meet this control. The policy is we're going to meet this NIST control for email identity management, right? And that's a policy. And then you have a procedure that says, here are the things that I'm going to do. Here are the procedures that I'm going to follow that are going to meet that policy, that will meet that control. So the procedures I might have to do would be, hey, I've got to buy an email tool. I'm going to use Google Mail, okay, or Microsoft 360. And then I'm going to configure it this way. So the procedure is I'm going to buy it, I'm going to license it, I'm going to budget it, and then the procedure is here's how I've set it up. Now, when you go and set up 360, you got to answer about 20 or 30 or 50 questions or whatever. But here's the procedure on how I do that. And that procedure is going to meet the policy. Hey, we're going to use Microsoft 360, which meets the control, okay? And then you also need what's called evidence. And the evidence is like screenshots and stuff. Like if Microsoft 360 said you had to have these 50 on-off buttons and all that stuff, as you're configuring your email, you take a screen scrape of that or a screenshot of that. Here's the evidence. So in a compliance scenario, control, policy, procedure, and evidence. The control is the standard. The policy has got to meet the standard. The procedure has to be such that you do things and document them, that they meet the policy that meets the standard. And then the evidence says, here's the evidence that reflects the procedure, that meets the policy, that meets the control. Check. I've got all that in place. I've only got 479 more things like that in order to get PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant or whatever. But in the compliance world, you got auditors that are coming in, and the first thing they ask you is, show me your documentation. Can you control, give me policy and procedure, give me evidence. They look at it, yep, looks good, check, you're good on that one. Or note, this evidence doesn't reflect what your procedures. Go and work out. that's a gap, right? And they'll kick it out.
So with all the compliance efforts and initiatives and strategists and tools, gosh, I guess it was like 2024 that the BEC industry was still garnering over 6 billion or whatever that number was. If all these things are being done, why is business email compromise still working so well? When it seems like leaders have told their team not to click suspicious emails, and you've got these tools in place, and you're documenting these compliance settings. Why is it still happening?
Why is it still happening? Because it's not easy to do, and not everybody's doing it, and not everybody has adult supervision. That's why they need guys like you and me, right? Literally. And the part that the CEO and the C-suite and the boards, right? The bigger the company, the more layers you have and stuff. But they know these are fatal errors. These are company, disruption, maybe company out of business kind of errors. Email compromise is definitely one of the big ones, right? Ransomware is definitely one of the big ones. Again, it's an awareness thing, and then it's an allocation of budgets and manpower and whatnot. So,
I mean, I think that same report said something like the average, or no, is that the median amount was something like 50 grand in BEC attacks, across the U.S. So, for a small business, that's very impactful. That's more than just a spreadsheet error. That's payroll, operating cash, project budget
well,
disappearing fast kind of issue.
reputational, you could lose customers. You could, you could get fined by your industry. I mean, it's serious stuff. So when I was kind of tongue in cheek say that, most of the people, when it comes to cybersecurity, they're hiding under their desks, just hoping it doesn't happen to them, right? But that's not a very good strategy. You at least, in order to mitigate the risk of being fined by the industry, right? In some control industries, you at least have to show like you're trying, right? It can't go in there blind with no effort at all. You'll be out of business. Not only will you be out of business, they won't let you be in business if you don't have the proper controls in place.
Sure.
So it's a very interesting scenario. My heart goes out to early stage firms because where do you at what point in time do you really start budgeting allocation of resources, people and money and programs and projects in an early stage firm that you're just trying to get your business off the ground, right? That's the hard thing, and quite frankly, that's I think that's one of the hardest decisions in SMB is when do I start to invest in this? But they should have an awareness. I mean, if nothing else, they should have an awareness.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you're trying to get a good team around you. Sometimes I like to think that, like your financial team, your accounting, whatever, that you want to train them like they're Usain Bolt. But when it comes to cutting checks and wires and stuff, we want to make sure that the approval workflows are more like the DMV line.
Right. Right.
Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the last metric, weight. Weight's kind of, maybe that leans into what you prefer to talk about, kind of the strategy thing. But what strategy metric do you think leaders should know about?
Well, first of all, the literally the strategy thing is that they should be aware that cybersecurity should be one of the table stakes issues that regardless of the company and the industry that you're in. It is a measurable risk. It's a measurable set of solutions to reduce that risk. And, you should, I get that there's all kinds of trade-offs, but the real issue's got to be at the CEO level or at the founder level to say, we need to build some risk reduction techniques and stuff in place. Everybody for SMB is, generally running around with their hair on fire, of course, trying to keep the business afloat and keep it going. But one of the biggest risks is definitely cybersecurity.
Do you find that economy has changed what you're seeing out of organizations and how they deal with cybersecurity?
I don't, no, I don't see it. I think there's it's kind of hard to say, but kind of hard to read. There's when you get to where you perceive that you're in critical mass, then you'll start to do some cybersecurity things. But if you're just at a formative stage trying to address a need in an industry, cybersecurity is not one of the top things you're thinking about. So the strategy part is, when does that kick in, right? And hopefully it kicks in before you have a major incident or a problem. It's really scary, actually, because right now, with what's going on, strategy wise, the bad guys are winning. And the tools that they have in place, we all talk about, AI is going to solve all the problems of the world, right? But guess what? There are a lot of bad people with a lot of bad intent, malicious intent, that are working with AI to accelerate their capabilities. So it's not a panacea that everything's going to be great. If nothing else, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because there's institutional drift. An example is somebody at Gartner, one of the big firms, big consulting firms, says 96% of all enterprise employees are using artificial intelligence in some form or fashion, but only 54% of the enterprises have any kind of governance on artificial intelligence. So you got people using these super powerful tools, maybe leaking data, maybe leaking processes, maybe, doing stupid stuff.
Yeah, all the shadow AI with no guardrails.
I'm sorry?
I said all the shadow AI with no guardrails.
Right. And they're playing with nitroglycerin. I mean, these are really powerful tools. So, from a strategy perspective, I think that cybersecurity should be an integral part of any company's strategy.
Yeah, one of the other things off of AI, but kind of a strategy thing, I think just the number of the percentage of breaches now involving a third party. I think I saw something that that number doubled from 50% to 30%. So just reminding you're only as secure as your least secure partner, and
Right.
doing more diligence in how you work with third parties.
And that's like, oh, great, I can't secure myself. How the hell am I going to secure my vendor base, right? But those are factors in the decisions that you'd make on the partners that you choose, right? So if you had, depending on your industry, if you had multiple options to buy a service or a product, that might come into the decision tree, right? And I think in this day and age, I think it's prudent that it is. There's a the industry is the Department of Defense, right? The Department of War has had standards forever. NIST 800-171, right? In different rub levels, right? That's just the versioning of what that standard is. People dealing with the Department of Defense, the Department of War. They've been rolling out literally for the last 10 years what's called CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model for the defense industrial base. And what that really means is there's 300,000+ companies that are selling ball bearings and widgets and whatnot to the Defense Department primes. And this new standard, on top of NIST 171, right, the CMMC standard, is finally kicking in. So now we've got an opportunity. We, as a vendor community, as a cybersecurity community, have got a major opportunity with these 300,000 companies that are being mandated. And it's kind of rolling out as it becomes prevalent. But prime contractors, when they come out with a new bid in the next couple of years, they're mandating that CMMC compliance is part of the bidding process. So if you're not certified as being secure from the CMMC perspective as a defense industrial base manufacturer, you can't even bid, right? So the next airplane that comes out, or the next smart bomb, or the next submarine, or the next, water fountain in one of the facilities, if they've got that CMMC clause in the bidding part of it, you got to be CMMC compliant. So I'm spending a lot of time in that community just because it's less mature and the clients aren't fully committed to their vendor base. They're still up and new vendors.
Yeah, it was still brand new to all of that. But I mean, even I guess across every industry, I mean, you brought up AI, I brought up third-party risk. There's I'm not aware of any hard and fast standards of, I mean, I see a lot of stuff out there, but with AI, we just, aside from AI in general and, data governance, and, now we're introducing, agentic security, API security, all of these, the injection security for your LLMs. That there's a whole new level of security that may not be hardly addressed, or there be a clear prescription on how to handle, or even the tools to do it that we're still having to help consult on.
We are at the starting line of that whole industry, and it's going to be a long run. I can tell you, this is a negative. This is proving a negative, that there is a standard in CMMC as it relates to COMC, the Department of Defense Defense Industrial Base. The standard is you will not use CMMC, period. I'm sorry, you will not use AI, period. And there are instances where if it's a very specific use case and it's not connected to the internet, it's not connected to any other system, it's just a single purpose, then that's got to be vetted. But the policy is no AI in CMMC. So that's, I mean, that's a very big statement right out of the chute, and it reflects what you just said. We're very much on the front end of the curve, the learning curve.
I mean, the closest thing I've seen is I've seen some stuff about, was it Unify Agentic Defense Platform? And, I know some vendors are kind of throughout tools, and, they're partially pieced together because it's so new, but, it's a lot. I mean, the MCPs, all the things that we're talking about now, weren't really technologies we were talking about a few weeks ago or a few months ago, or, whatever. And, it's just a lot of it is so new and evolving so exponentially. Sometimes we don't even know what we don't know, just because things are changing so rapidly.
Well, it's going to take time, especially in a glacial industry like the Department of Defense, right, where it takes so long to get anything done. But one of the things that I've suspected and kind of confirming is that the Department of War, the CMMC stuff, is that's the canary in the coal mine. Is that once that gets starts to mature, and the learning curves are done from both sides, the supplier side and the procurement side, then it will drift to other federal agencies, right? So it's kind of the canary in a coal mine, and it's kind of rolling out in the Department of Defense or Department of War. So it's going to be interesting. It's I tell you what, I on a separate note, and this comes back to what what the current topic is of strategy. I basically tell every person that'll listen to me, including grandmothers and grandfathers and 10-year-old kids, man, if you're not spending 3 to 5 hours a week doing something with artificial intelligence, reading it, goofing around with it, writing posts with it, creating movies, creating pictures, if you don't have your hands on the wheel with something about artificial intelligence, you're going to get left behind. And you better go into the trades, because the world is changing so quickly. It's a fundamental change. It's a fundamental shift. So AI is here, it's here to stay, and it's growing exponentially.
Definitely a lot to keep up with, and I invest a lot of time on it. It's become a really good friend at work, and I've been watching all the Texas legislation. Not just the AI TREGA, but also the privacy stuff and the
Yeah.
Safe Harbor Cybersecurity Act. All of those kinds of things. And sometimes keeping up with the legislation is just as difficult as the compliances or as the technologies.
Well, there's a very interesting rule of thumb that relates to privacy. In privacy, in the EU, privacy drives cybersecurity. In the States, cybersecurity drives privacy. There's a big difference, right? So GDPR is very serious. They're actually kind of thinking about softening it a little bit because it's so restrictive. But they came out with the standard of GDPR, and the States is implementing it differently. There's, I think, about 13 or 15 states that have all come out with their own cybersecurity standards, and those will eventually all aggregate. And one of the, let's say, mandates from the Congress is that it's a single standard, right? They're gonna try to loop all the state standards into a single standard. So if you're doing business in California, you got to meet the California privacy standards, and same in New York and same in Massachusetts, and they're all relatively the same, but they're all different enough that you need to test, and you need to build the control and the policy and the procedure and the evidence to be able to meet it such that you meet that standard. It's complicated. I would say it's not that hard to figure out. It's really hard to implement. But that's the world we're living in right now.
Well, Peter, I think as we kind of come towards the end of our time here, we've covered a little bit about risk, about strategy, where leaders can go wrong by waiting too long or not seeing the full picture, or where they can go right by doing a few things. But if you were speaking directly to a business owner, executive director, city leader, whatever, trying to make one smart decision next, what's your one big takeaway you want them to take away from our conversation today?
Again, get a baseline. Just understand what you have. It's all risk related. These are all business decisions as a function of that risk. Can't assess the risk unless you know what you have in hand. So, risk related, it's one of the biggest risks you have. Cybersecurity is, or lack thereof. Get a baseline assessment and be educated to make the decisions you're making. That's my walk away. That's the way I speak.
I like it, straight from the identity pillar. So along with that, as a good doctor, I can't just give you direction. Sometimes I got to give out some medications for you. So if you had some smaller prescriptions, things that they could take away to help them through, I guess we like good doctors, maybe we officially scared them just enough to be helpful. But I'd like to give them some help so that they can sleep tonight. What prescriptions would you give them?
And we spoke about it. Go right to the standard, the NIST. I'm sorry, the CIS 18 standard, and you can put that. I got a copy of that. It's basically 18 categories, and when you look at the categories, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's common sense. Oh yeah, that's common sense. That's common sense, right? Go and take a look at that. There's one document that's a 1-page document that is a very, very nice high level. Hey, these are the things that you should be aware of. And then, oh, by the way, here's the cadence. The first, control category number 1, that's the stuff you should get to first. And frankly, when within that document or within that standard, they have it set up that it's a small, medium, large, right? Implementation group 1 is small companies, right? Hey, there's 7 controls in this category 1. If you're really small, you only need to do 1 or 2, right? If you're medium sized, then you need to do maybe 4 or 5. And if you're a bigger entity, you might have to do you should be doing all set. So it's different implementation groups. And that's laid out in that document. So it's a one page takeaway, SIS 18.
Yeah, I guess look at some of those. I felt like there was yeah, people were thinking they were secure looking at IG1, and they might have 10 or 15 safeguards, and then realize they need to have 56, and they just weren't near where they thought they were, and just kind of felt it was really eye-opening.
Well, it is eye-opening, and it should be. And again, it's a function of risk, right? And that's why they have it in a prioritized order.
Well, now if any of my audience want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Peter at GaileySolutions.com, GAILEY solutions.com. You can hit my website and hit my LinkedIn page, or give me a call.
Got it.
214-336-1286.
Show notes and stuff. And then for myself, you can always reach me at thedoctor@fulcrumgroup.net or on LinkedIn. I usually only link up if you mention we connected through the episode. I guess that kind of brings us to the end of our doctor's appointment. And so
Right.
I guess in closing, if there's one thing I hope you took away today, it's just that cybersecurity isn't about panic. It's about having a plan, having a plan, the right people, and then the discipline to follow through. So as the great philosopher Morpheus once said, I can only show you the pill, but you have to choose the path from here.
Right.
So be sure to check out my podcast some more. Subscribe, like, share it with someone you love. It's the gift that keeps giving. And also reach out if you know someone who would make a great guest or suggest another topic that execs would like. I'm your host, Steve the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is out. See you next time. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Steve.